Hello, my name is Brian Stokes. I'm the Vice President of Early Learning at Illinois Action for Children. Illinois Action for Children has partnered with the Department of Family and Support Services to provide training and technical assistance to community-based early learning programs in the city of Chicago that are interested in potentially being a part of the city's early learning programs moving forward. This webinar will address financial modeling and budgeting as programs prepare to think about their programs over the next 5 years. As I mentioned, this webinar is a part of our core training and technical assistance for community-based early learning programs. This first phase of technical assistance will take place from March 21st through April 30th of 2019 and is in preparation for and support for the city's request for proposals process. So far, we've heard interest from organizations about needing support around budgeting and financing, managing multiple funding streams, strategic planning, market research, marketing and branding. And so we are building training both in person and webinar that will support all of those needs. Please spread the word to any providers across the city who may be interested at registration@actforchildren.org. People can email us and let us know they'd like to be added to our mailing list. Next slide. So the first piece of thinking about financial modeling is projecting revenue. Right now, programs in the city use three main funding streams: federal funds from Head Start and Early Head Start, Preschool for All and Fringe Initiative state funding, and the state's Child Care Assistance Program. It's important to understand your revenue and think about how to project your revenue moving forward. As data informs our understanding of demographics across the city and in various communities, you'll need to think about how fluctuations in enrollment may impact revenue and how changes in the children and families that your program needs to serve may impact your revenue as well. If the Child Care Assistance Program, for example, is a part of your overall budget plan, think about how many children you need to be eligible at any given time and how many need to be enrolled at any given time. How does this compare to your current trends and demographics, and is it sustainable? Ultimately, your program design will influence your budget and your revenue. Next slide. Throughout this technical assistance and training project, we'll be talking a lot about operational budgeting. Your operational budget is your operating budget on an annual basis for your program. Most current community-based organizations in the city will already have an operating budget. Newer programs may or may not, but it's something you'll need to really think about in order to be ready for this RFP process. In building your budget, consider your fixed and scalable expenses. Your fixed expenses will generally not vary based on the number of classrooms you're operating and the number of kids you have enrolled at any given time. They're really built into the infrastructure of your program. So fixed expenses really include things like rent. If you rent a certain size building, whether you're operating all of your classrooms or not, your rent will remain the same. Site director salary, salaries of food service and cleaning staff, these things are generally going to be relatively fixed by site. And so if you decide that your program design requires you to make changes in your capacity or the number of classrooms you have open, consider whether or not your new program design supports these fixed expenses. Your scalable expenses change as the number and composition of your classrooms change. Opening new classrooms, for example, requires new teacher salaries, new program supplies, and professional development, especially if you're changing program models to serve younger children or a different demographic of children. At the same time, consider that these scalable expenses will not necessarily scale based on your current enrollment. A preschool classroom that currently enrolls 11 children has the same expenses as a fully enrolled classroom serving 17 or 20. You still need 2 teachers, you'll still need a lot of the same supplies. And so thinking about your enrollment and outreach process is critical to understanding whether or not your budget supports your scalable expenses. In compiling your request for proposals and thinking about your budget, there are a number of questions that you should consider. Is your program's budget resilient to shifts in demographics and changes in the children qualifying for each funding stream? What about your economy of scale? So are you designing a program that's large enough to cover all of your fixed costs and to sustain for the long term? Also think about who your program serves now. From the data that you've received so far and will continue to receive, we know that communities are changing, and we know that the resources and programs available to families may change in various communities. So how does who your program serves now compare to who's in your community now, and how does that compare to who in your community still has not been served? And then think about what needs to change in your program to meet the needs that you're seeing and what the budget implications of those changes might be. Excellent. And so this leads us into thinking about budgeting for change. Last Friday, your program received a wealth of information from DFSS about projections of density and capacity in communities across the city, in addition to information about communities that will receive increased services from Chicago Public Schools. And so as you consider where your community falls in both density and capacity, that provides you with a roadmap to really thinking about your program plan. This projection data is an important tool to figuring out how to structure your program in the future. And it leads you to think about where you need to be immediately and what you need to do as an organization long term. The density and capacity chart should lead you to think about which age groups your community currently serves well and which age groups your community needs more capacity to serve. Consider how this data provides a roadmap for your planning. It also leads to thoughts about your staffing model. For many communities across the city, the data indicates a substantial need for more 0 to 3 services. Consider the staffing models necessary to accomplish this change. We know that classrooms for children under the age of 3 require a higher level of staffing. And so as you prepare your proposal, your budget request will need to reflect the revenue needed to support a model with that higher staffing, as well as any other additional changes in your program that may be necessary to support this model. That might include things like additional furnishings and equipment. Make sure that your budget model accounts for all of these needs. As we think about the shifting demographics of the city and the shifting need, one of the challenges that community-based programs will face is thinking about blending and braiding of funds and the children who should be targeted by any particular CBO. Currently, many programs rely on all 3 funding streams in order to sustain their program and sustain their program design. As we look at the funding streams, Preschool for All and Furnish Initiative, of course, is the most flexible, generally serving most children who are below 200% of the federal poverty limits. Only a subset of those children will qualify for Head Start and Early Head Start, children who are below 100% of the federal poverty limits, with priority, of course, for children who have disabilities or children who have other priority risk factors. The Child Care Assistance Program is prioritized for families or serves families who are working or in school. As minimum wage continues to increase, families who are where one parent is working or even 2 parents are working who would qualify for the Child Care Assistance Program are generally going to be over income for Head Start and Early Head Start. And we've seen that trend across the city for some time. And so it's important to think about how your program is going to identify which families you need to serve. And so looking at the next slide here, in the future, moving forward, a business model that's built on every child qualifying for all 3 funding streams may not be viable. And so if that's the model your program has operated on or that your program relies on, your budget request in this proposal may need to look differently. So give some thought to how much your current business model relies on children qualifying for 3 funding streams and whether or not that's viable based on community data. also give real thought to the needs of your community and how that impacts your anticipated revenue. And we'll look at some examples later, but if your community has a struggle with unemployment or underemployment, or if you're in a community where a number of families who may not be working or whose parents may not be in school are not being served, that really opens up an opportunity to think about those families who are eligible for Head Start and Early Head Start, as well as PFA and PI, but are not CCAP eligible, those families that are that tend to be less well served. This fiscal planning is only one component of thinking about your program plan and your program design. Your revenue projections should inform your community needs assessment. Your community needs assessment, of course, informs your program design, and your program design includes your budget and you're thinking about the expenses that you need to sustain your program. And your program design should also influence your recruitment and outreach plan. If your program design calls for you to really find the families who are the most at risk, you need an outreach plan that's going to target those families where they are. That planning, of course, impacts your revenue. And so a robust recruitment and outreach plan is going to provide the revenue that you need to meet the needs of your community. This succeeding at this cycle requires that fiscal and program staff work in collaboration. Here's an example of a community looking at their data and identifying a need for change. And so in this example community, the sample's community demographics have changed, and there are fewer CCAP eligible families. There are, however, a number of unserved families with young children who are not connected to early childhood. This community is also a target for universal pre-K from CPS. And so the community-based organizations in this community will be charged to find and serve children under the age of 4. Fewer children will need a full workday, and more will require a full school day. This requires different outreach strategies. Community partners working, with WIC offices or housing organizations or other groups that support families currently will be a key target to support your outreach efforts. And so thinking about this example, the organization working in this community needs to give serious thought to the staff needs who are going to support and conduct this intensive level of outreach. And so if we look at this, although class size may be reduced, so if we're targeting 3-year-olds in a full school day model, then the number of staff supporting the classroom is the same, but maybe staffed differently, maybe structured differently. The fixed costs, the building level are of course the same. And so the community-based organization needs to think about what a budget request is of federal and state funding in order to sustain the program without necessarily relying on CCAP and acknowledging that the program has lower class sizes. And so the budget request needs to still support those full classroom needs of teaching staff, program supplies, as well as all the building-wide fixed costs in order to be sustainable. Many of you may have attended our workshop last week on strategic planning, hosted by my colleague Sherry Ferris. And so I wanted to revisit that in thinking about budget planning and fiscal modeling. So preparing for change requires a new way of thinking, and so you're responding to a changing landscape. And the essence of this strategic planning is answering 3 basic questions. Where are we today? Where do we want to be? And how will we get there? And all of this is, of course, in the context of the environment that you're operating in. And that environment is informed by the data that we have on communities across the city. It's important in doing this to challenge assumptions and to explore new connections and combinations. And so here is another example community and a scenario. And so where this community may be today, based on looking at data, is that there is a decreasing demand for community-based programs serving preschool-age children and significant numbers of children under the age of 3 who are not served. Where we want to be, of course, is that all of our sites are fully enrolled with the most at-risk children and that the program is financially sustainable. How will we get there? We need to reprogram some of our classrooms to serve children under the ages of 3. We need to propose a budget amount during the proposal process that supports additional staff needs, and we need to hire additional staff to support and serve the new population. And so there are a number of budget implications for this plan. The program needs to look at the costs of startup, the costs of converting classrooms from serving, say, 20 children or even 17 children to now serving 2 groups of 8 perhaps, and the additional staff required there. The program needs to think about how to license the new space and what additional funding may be necessary to outfit a new space and provide supplies, equipment, and a safe and quality environment for younger children. The program needs to consider additional support. So, moving to serve a younger age group may require content experts who understand infant toddler development, as well as additional training and professional development for staff. There may be great early childhood staff who would be interested and willing to serve and work in a setting with younger children, but may not have the content expertise. It's also important to think about the needs for professionals for recruitment and outreach. So changing to a new age group requires a different approach. It may not be as easy to find families who are looking for a program or who are aware of programs for their younger child. And so the plan for recruitment and outreach needs to shift. And that will, of course, inform your budget revenue projections as well. And of course, as we mentioned before, it's important to think about the role of the Child Care Assistance Program. If the majority of families in this community may not meet child care eligibility, is it possible to build a budget using federal and state funds through this request proposal process? And if so, how do you need to staff your programs if most families will only need a full school day? Does every classroom need to be open for a full working day? These are the questions of program design that will inform your budget and will inform your projections. It is expected that this process will continue. Through this process, that DFSS will continue to permit delegates to partner, as they have with licensed child care centers and licensed family child care homes. And so these partners are also, of course, a part of your revenue projections as a program and as an agency. As an extension of your agency, partners need to have the resources to provide the same quality of services that you would expect in your own directly operated programs. A child who is being served by Chicago's early learning program should be served in the same quality way, with the same care and support and family services as they would in any other setting. It's important to think about the resources that your partner will need. So what are the resources that you need to build the capacity of your partners and improve quality? This might include the physical support to your partner, and of course include the physical support to your partner, but also includes the support you provide, family support, coaching, back office services. And so it's important to think about what your structure is internally to support your partners, and that your budget request reflects those needs. We also need to talk about compensation, that your budget request needs to ensure that your partner can provide adequate compensation to their staff who are working in your Chicago early learning classrooms. Think about the population your partner intends to serve and the population that you intend for your partner to serve. If you anticipate that your partner is going to serve mostly families who are the most at risk and who qualify for Head Start and Early Head Start, many of those families are not going to also qualify for this Child Care Assistance Program. And so it's important to think about the resources physically that you need to provide, as well as the outreach and recruitment resources that you need to support your partner with in order to find those families. And this item of compensation is very important because ultimately we are running anti-poverty programs, and it's critical that our anti-poverty programs do not perpetuate poverty by underpaying our staff. You think about, of course, as well, the costs that you'll incur to provide additional services to your partners. Once again, with thinking of quality, if you're not directly paying your partner to provide it, the responsibility then on you as a delegate is to support your partner with these services. And so building in the real cost of those services, family support at reasonable ratios, coaching support that really moves teachers in partner settings towards quality, comprehensive mental health. The real cost of those need to be reflected in your proposal. Next slide. I've included here a couple additional resources. The Center for Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes, CELO, has a cost of preschool quality and revenue calculator. There's a quick sign-up process, but you'll be able to access a lot of their tools. Their tools, some of them are designed at a system or state level, but there is a lot of great information there for programs. And of course, eClick, the Early Childhood Knowledge and Learning Center, has an entire website dedicated to fiscal management systems that you should take a look at as well. And finally, I've included my own contact information here. I'm looking forward to being a part of this technical assistance process as we continue. And thank you so much for being a part of the webinar today.